All right. Good morning, everyone. So we'll start with Lamrim Kappa Guruyog on page number 7. Is it just a second? On the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of the Shita, on the peak of a cloud resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, king of Dhamma, omniscient, lost and Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on the line throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit with my mind of faith, please abide for 100 eon to spread the teaching. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of object to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanation is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory and renown. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of Mary. Whatever non-virtues of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginning this time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practicing in this degenerate age and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful. But abandoning your 8 worldly concerns, Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect pure Guru, from the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure loss and Drakpa's teaching to shine forever. Sashi Ki Jushi Meto Lamrim Shi Nidegen Padi Sangye Shindu Mikte Owa Hidro Kunanda Shila Chobarsho. By the merits of having offered this mandala, just to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings who are able to meet, practice, and actualize teachings of the victorious ones, Losam Drakpa, where the morality of eminently pure way of and good conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplish the yoga of the 2 stages of brim, bliss, and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiyadaya. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one, enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and the imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So the 5-line mixima. Mimete wete chen chen rezi, jime kembe wampo jampe an, dupu malu zonze saweda, kanchen kebe tsunge tsongkapa, losandra pe shabla sowa de, mimete wete chen chen rezi. Dupu malu zonze la, kanchen kebe tsongkapa, shabla sowa de. Sangye chusama.
Sangye chedan tsojun chonun la chanchu bardu dani kyabsun che dagi chushi yibin tsonun cholan penche sangye drupara sho Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonula Chanju Bardu Dani Kyausun Dagi Chushi Gibin Chonungi Drola Benji Sanjin Drupara Shu Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonula Chanju Bardu Dani Kyausun Chi Dagi Chushi Gibin Chonungi Drola Benji Sanjin Drupara Shu 강기 투진이 손에 따와 통제 방비체를 담비 주는 된지 거듭 제라 창세로 Good morning everyone. 등한들이 직대 뭐 로그인다 쓰라 먼저 안전한서 뒤따다 용된도 망첸자 안 지단기 내된도다 고쳐거스니 니네 맞다 내가 직디 아니 쇼코라나는 막베 시우도스 디치디기다 and ditsuta injitolo gyona ta telesage chagyenza ani karsegore ndanganzu chik sikti songdi koran ma chik kawkalan rotuwana ani chelapche yujir samgudusra.
Geshe is planning today to go straight into the text and pick up from the point that we left off previously. Looking at the people that are here today, many of you, most of you have been here before, so you're quite familiar with this subject matter. So Geshe is going to read through the section that we've been covering in the last session or two, death and impermanence. And it is very straightforward, very clear, particularly when you look at the way that it was translated into English. Geshe feels that it's quite clear. So we're going to cover a few passages today. And as such, not only it's a vital topic, also taken from this precious text. So certainly there are a lot of blessings contained in this topic.
direshata kadzingin samdi kyutagembe
nibarasum tambo dun shinduchewa ada kadam peshi sachiyosamne chiwa chembe lo nemashikena pena derin sange natso nyametuntala umashigaba lungdi chandwa
장세
je
이제 음식이야 되는 로제다 음식이야 쉽게 빨리 장스 강란직 된 숨가와 다 라니치다 제보메 여든 남신예로네 텔레마론 지시여스 소연 되는 곳 다드니마 참 되는마 로그인스라.
So looking at where we are in the text. In the previous session, we started to look at the recollection of death, remembering death, the thought that one is not going to stay in this world for a long time. Now, we began with the disadvantages of not cultivating mindfulness of death. And we, out of the few points in that section, I think there's 5 points in this section, we ended in looking at point E, not holding to permanence includes induces attachment, aversion, and so forth, and how to induce faulty behavior. Let me just make this text slightly larger. So then, in relation to that, Aryadeva in his 400 stanzas says, when someone sleeps as though the ruler of the three worlds, the Lord of Death, did not exist, what else could be more awful than that?
어들 다지당한서 까보기 처음에 딱 봤을 때 송구연서 당한서 아니 지 긴칠라 라마메바 아니 간서 끼니 아니 치고와 단 직딩기 춘이리 송야티 직딩기 춘이 간다서 차거레스 라운디 간서 아니 끼위 규 타가랑기 아니 치와 치그레 마도 인지민이 간서 치와치 끼인디 아니 랑리 친중기 규든 현질이야 되고에 자원이 요마레스 규든 현지 요마레스다 간지 아니 규조디 라니 계지 규 타랑기 아니 간서 치와치 규차그레 마도베 아니 딜리 심비 규칙 요 말이스 딘자란 트sam이니 지 아니 치다기 ngong야 트데바 치와 녜데바 딘디지려야 따지 비지 아니 치외 톨야 상로지야 마당치 아니 지 아니 비 텐도 대야토 아니 친딜야 니야 아니 체드로 상로 대장장 내가 대장장 진 대대바이나 아니 가야 마진니 니로네 대바데 찍바로지레스 라 디즈다 디 가스고다 먼저 남기 용라시반다 지 미국백 소로지 국바 임바는 레든 두싱 말하다 어디 소로지다 아니 차기요레스 어디 직송도 아즈 레벤 아얀 대박.
So the Master Aryadeva says here that we have, first of all, no freedom. We have no freedom or no control over birth and death. And particularly when we think of the nature of this world, the nature of this world is impermanent, disintegrating from moment to moment or changing from moment to moment. And as such, it is guaranteed that once you're born, you will certainly die. Whatever is born will certainly die, because this is the nature of an impermanent world. So we don't need to rely upon any other causes for death, in a sense that just by being born, it is guaranteed that we will die. There's no need to rely upon any other cause for death, other than thinking that just because I was born, I will certainly die. The Lord of death will certainly come. There's no way to avoid the Lord of death because I was born. So then, although death is certain, we don't often think about it. Not only we don't think about it, also we are thinking and preparing to remain for a very long time in this life, making preparations for living a very long life. We are like being completely asleep. We behave completely foolish. We are foolish in not thinking of death.
어디에 디기 다지 딜이야 가서다 냄베 소로직 로 갑줄고 쳬도저제도스다 아니 자스치무 시발레 쫀죽리 소한티 탐제 벼데 체거버 나기 테들 마신이 자다면제 땡기지 디반나만 하소 체세티 딘즈간즈 끼zam니니 깨와 치말아야 롱예진 차데바 지글야 아니 깨와 치미 템마드니 아니 쳔델야 다지 비게 인 데바이나 다 니마지글야 탐제샤니 쳔디기 지 아니 쳔디 온드 치비기 땀년다지 닝년년데지 지 르롱주 용수 조바 샤데 드고야 니마지 샤기라스 아니 디디기 아니 다 딘디기 지 드로비 체도 아니 드고야 바 자원이니 마신체 아니 쳔디기 지 아니 자다만자기 땡기 아니 베기 다직 디바나 나소스 라운디치 아니 메게와 나소바치 간지 잔데 마임비 레간 나소바치 세비 레간 드라마데 체데야디 베드 노르샨독스 베드 노르교레스.
And Shantideva is adding his support to what Aryadeva is saying. In drawing from Shantideva's engaging in the Bodhisattva behavior, it says, everything has to be left behind, unaware that this is so, and did bad action of all sorts for the sake of friends and foes. So indeed, we're unaware, or we don't think of our upcoming death. We don't think that one day we will leave behind everything that we worked hard for in this life. First of all, our circle of friends and relatives, the possessions that we have, our reputation, all the different things that we've amassed in this life, all of them will be left behind, and none of them will continue with us to into the future. So not thinking about it, we become completely engrossed in the pursuit of friends and relatives and possessions and money and reputation and so forth. And on account of that, we perform so many negative actions. We accumulate negativities in acting in countless various ways, often becoming negative. So this is a great mistake.
디레자다 드니 다숑 다 제롬식 랑 송레스다 니바네스다 치워tim빌로 남식게나 아 론네마식게나 론네마식게나 페나 데린 산랑 치워 탁 쳐바나스 추기 코반 텐드 여바 양첼라 ཉེན 소바탄 촉스메번 통니 라 겨치말이야 직 티엘라 소바 케엘라 소바 메번 통니 아니 텔라 세바 도지 아니 동을로 소비 고니 님불렌데 파치라 랑기 낭긴 종았다 닝kurson jigdingi chugicher beba tamji nimbu meban toni nyejuli doji kyamrodan Tsultrim sobi lezambu sobi gongban tamba rangi zigde drowa namgen teri tigbina teli tuenchewa jishigyo diichir pe tumi gyangagdi nyangin dachinli shin muwa tamji inana dengi lodo chogo je tamji inana panangi je chogo döshi tamji inana 메다바든 치윈 디신 초인데 데다 긴네 감슴긴 되바다 마리바다 나게 탐지 세토 셰소스 디바디샤 노나.
So we've looked at Lamrim and Kappa's explanation of the disadvantages of not being mindful of death and impermanence. Let's look at a second point in the main reflection on death and impermanence, which is the reflection on the advantages of becoming aware of death and impermanence, the advantages of cultivating it, beginning with the great value. And Lamrim Kappa says, if a genuine mind recollecting death arises, it is like, for example, with most people when they are convinced they will die in the next few days, today or tomorrow. Even those with only a little understanding of Dhamma, seeing that they will be unaccompanied by friends and relatives, naturally their craving for them will be reversed. And they will want to extract the essence by way of giving and so on, seeing that all efforts made for the sake of such worldly concerns as material gain, honor, and so forth are futile. We will desist from faulty behavior. We will accumulate the good karmas of going for refuge, ethics, and so forth, by which we will ascend to a holy state and also lead sentient beings there. So what is there more meaningful? That is why it is also praised with many analogies. In the great Nirvana Sutra, it says, among all plowing of fields, plowing in autumn is best. Amongst all footprints, the elephant's footprints are best. Amongst all perceptions, those of impermanence and death are best. They eliminate all the desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms.
어디래다 아니 까우깔이야 직 차부딘데 어디 가리나 섬소요는 알 카두 트로치스라.
Now we are reading through different sections in this part of the text, and if you have any questions every once in a while, if you find that some of the passages are complicated or you would like Geshe to elaborate on them, please don't hold back. You can put your hand up and Geshe will try to clarify your doubts.
데네단다 디 타마딜이야 빼든 샤야디. 저 심모 탐지기 나니 땡귤로도 초레세. 제 탐지기 나니 반항기 제 초레. 뒤시 탐지기 나니 메다번 뒤시와 메다바든 치윈 뒤시 초레세디. 아니 메다바든 치윈 뒤시 초 임바디 카레스나 메다바다 치윈 뒤시 지기요 바이나 아니 템 만노와지 드투 그레스. 페나로지 페나 반항 비 람부치기 제 통바이나 디 란친 디 촐라야 란친 요바디 갸차 갸담바 지수지다 만나와 란친 지임바디 라 세부진 또투그러스 텔레야 란친 요바디 때 지코랑기 토니 만나와지 또투그러스 베디지기 샤가도스 야 찍디 간줄로도 모구요리 사신 모구요르다 이나야고 아니 뒤기 차니 아니 땡글로도디 코피기 아니 종아다 간지 토니 로도기에 뒤 코란 차가 되디 아니 배 뒤토 로도디 때 약시 쓰고라 생각들어 아니 지뒤 마힘 비기다 아니 배나 신도든지 답시기 두수 야가스키 쓰고 말하다 까고를 끼고 말아서 어든 다 약시디 아니 뒤쪽 코랑 돈이 샤자위기 로도도 약수 차그러스 어디도 찍바레스로
We read through the passage from the Great Nirvana Sutra, which says it uses analogies such as amongst all plowing of fields, plowing in autumn is best. Amongst all footprints, the elephant's footprints are the best. That's the most supreme ones. And then it says with the meaning, amongst all perceptions, the mental attitude that you take, those of impermanence and death are the best. In that if you develop the mental attitude that considers death and impermanence, you will be able to pursue unmistaken meaning. And the pursuit after unmistaken meanings will eliminate all the desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms. So just like, for example, you said that once when you notice the footprint of an elephant, it is clearly, you will see that it is clearly a footprint of an elephant, and you'd be able to certainly 100% correctly identify that there was an elephant that was walking along the road. Or amongst all plowing of fields, although you might plow your field at different seasons of the year, different times of the year, still in terms of the best season for plowing your field is said to be autumn. In that if you do it during other seasons, for example, during the summer, it might be that your crop will yield fruit, or it might not yield fruit. In terms of doing it in the autumn, it says to be that guarantees that your crop will be bountiful.
대전도 뉴문당 예저 탐지 직접든 좀비 토와당스 게레 탐지 직접든 드비 고 겨발라 소베 나보스다 메다빈 디시텔이야 땅가보 망부 쇼치 주 나야디 예저 탐지 직접든 좀 통인기 아니 토와다 마소나 피디 메다빈 디시테레스 아니 게레 탐지 직접든 드비 다지 고다베디야 düşütiriz. Dorna kevi tendribütüne ten kabarci tobdün de konayla ögür perçeva ngandro deci dendro lenre zam onga mukombi nesu şiçevi terçü dribi kap manila dribi çokbi ten re tobana yam çü çüjündü mıdrıbanı tadon meçi nyamba dila tungdubi nas lu meçi vi çok zımbanı gobokungi godan 치워트만은 분소 탐지 있고 대체는 듣다불라 추사모 제 검규 매번 남기 냠내노 냠바타 검자이야 담보 총세 검기 균도 냠내 또 몽수 냠도 무송바 통타 파rsum도 골룩라 네번이 타반이 게데 검버차오스
And the great value of the recollection of death and impermanence concludes in saying, similarly it is praised amongst other things as a hammer that destroys all mental afflictions and all faulty behavior at once, right? So the reflection on death and impermanence eliminates all faulty behavior, and it is also a gate to the simultaneous accomplishment of all that is virtuous and excellent. Now, the next point that Lama Tsongkhapa makes is saying that it is the gate to all excellence. In brief, the time for accomplishing the goal of beings is only the time we have gained the special basis. We mostly remain in the lower rebirths, and even if we make it to fortunate rebirths just once, there are predominantly places lacking freedom, so that we do not find an opportunity to accomplish the Dharma. If we gain the basis suited to accomplishing the Dharma, and still do not accomplish it properly, it is due to this thought of, I'm not going to die yet. Therefore, this mind that holds to the position of not dying is the door to all manner of degeneration, and mindfulness of death is the door to all excellence.
대장이 책도마지 아니 세부로질론 개갑도 책된다 고마다이냐 이 미유 쪽으로디 비 땅이 송디 지 치균 롱균 창상 토비연자 아니 계란솔이야 다디직 아니 직 토그레삼니 라 계란솔다 비기게 데버 영에서 디생겨서 디토그레삼니 아니 슈디게 스팅한테 쩌다 최체발이야 베는 람룸 로종 체발이야 아니 람룸 기 비기 맹아 기바디 소소 랭고에 디페 개첨부 진럽 기바 메나 시기 탄다 남장 가주 직시 바이나야 디기 가서 샘라 펜바디 페마세바 카부차고 서레스로 디 여바이나 페 펜도 침부지 디인자 당한 남긴 도쇼라야 아니 지 롱균 치균 데니 지 아니 dom균라 소바디 아니 개침부 슈 츠데 에디 디렌도 아스로 디찬당이 닌데네 지 츠디 강 아니 지 다다 아니 살섬 토니 아니 베준치야디 미규딘스.
So Geshe is continuing with the reading of this section and also giving us a transmission of these instructions, which is very important. So in terms of receiving transmissions, or as they're called in Tibetan, lung, there are different types of transmissions. There's a reading transmission in which a text is being read to you. There's also an explanatory transmission, which is imbued also with an explanation, and the one that is also imbued with instructions for practice. So it's important to receive those transmissions if your mind is set on putting, for example, the Lamrim into practice and making your practice to become effective. If you're missing out on the transmission of the text that explains the Lamrim, it is hard, will be difficult for the practice to become thorough. So the transmission is regarded to be very important. And as we said, there are different types of transmissions: reading transmission, explanatory transmission, transmission of vows, and so forth. All of them ensure that we get the lineage of those instructions which are passed on through transmissions.
Sumbani nyenla sobadan targi togni tagbani lamla majambi chiwala taglu yimbe dir tekeba mino wana kanyamna lengi ongi lu lamba tamji chiwale mandebe tela tagba kejang rishik la ga minime wenja ngandri gyung gobata ngundu ngele ji gyu madrubar chiwala jigbar chade tela ni thi tagba samna thi drubdu yebe chikar mitagba char yola tende madrubna chin kowale metarshi kabardu ngandru longwi jigni chibitsi gyobe domar gyurus.
So as Geshe has received all this transmission, is passing them on to us. So the third point in that section says, therefore, you should not think this is a practice for those who do not have other profound Dhamma to meditate on. And although it is something to meditate on, it should be meditated on a bit in the beginning, but is not suitable to be practiced continuously. Rather, you should meditate on it until you gain certainty from the bottom of your heart that it is necessary in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Now, the next section, which is the third main point in the section on death and impermanence, is what kind of mind that is mindful of death is generated. So here Lama Tsongkhapa says the fear born from worries about separation from relatives and the like is the kind of fear of death of those who are not trained in the path. So here, this is not what is to be generated. Well then, what kind of fear is to be generated? All bodies taken under the power of karma and mental afflictions do not pass beyond death, which is why, even though this may give rise to fear, death cannot be prevented for the time being. However, you should be afraid of dying without having stopped the causes of lower rebirths, or having accomplished the causes for higher states and definite goodness. In this regard, if you think about the resulting fear, those two can be accomplished so that you will not be afraid on the verge of dying. If you do not achieve that objective, for fear of not being liberated from the cycle of existence in general and of falling into the lower rebirth in particular, you will be tormented by remorse at the time of death.
Yashidadi domrodi, Nandu Chivala any Chivin Dushi Gores, Chivala Tagba Gores Adi, and in Chivala Tagba Gores Adi, and in Anzo Daji and Nyan de la Soba Tarnita, Chion di Zambalachi, Nyan de la Tarni, any pay Taji and to some laundry something which Tamanchik Yoros, or Dilla Gores and Dimares, Dichi, Lamla Majambi, Chivala Taluri, Di, come di Shigio Maris. One and Nanzo da Lenin Gongi Kiva and the Lenin Gongi Chigori Samchini, da Digitally and the Tabare Sena, Tian Tezamaris, Tilia Trani, Nanzuchik, Nega Gudun Druptuaski Yomaras, Ronganzuta, and Lenin Gongi Kids of Lenin Gongi Chidra di Nega and Shujing Jigdachi and Dili Uyadi Karbu Shujras. Ta Kargores Laundi, ta and Kiva Chima. Ngandru kia gyu goya da dendru toya gyutru matuni ani chinata pesagri sambigi samlo diris di nganzu driptuguri cheyores di lod kiba na nganzu la pendo yore o di gores segores tarwa tego domjigre dasra.
So we read through the third passage that explains the type of reflection of death and impermanence that we should have. So first of all, Amazon Kappa says here, let's look at what we don't need to have. So in reflecting upon death and impermanence, a certain fear arises in our mind, and the fear that we want to develop is not the one that is just thinking that soon I will be separated from all those who are close to my heart, my friends and relatives and so forth. I will lose all of them. That's not the type of fear that is to be generated. Also, it is not a simple fear that in which we fear being born under the control of common afflictions and dying under the control of common afflictions, fear of those occasional states. Also, that is not the type of fear that we should have. The fear of of just being born or just dying under the sway of common afflictions is something that is really difficult to discard. The type of fear that we should have when we think of death and impermanence is fear of not doing enough in order to avoid miserable states of rebirth in the future. So we reflect upon death and impermanence, and we develop the certainty that indeed one day we will die. And following that, if we were to take a miserable rebirth, it is not something that we would want to do. So we fear miserable states of rebirth, and we fear not having made enough preparation for a good state of rebirth in the next lifetime. This is the type of fear that we want to develop.
There is that tending on the and it's Chomata Gongore said that Kuni Dopi Surnite and on the Nambi that you gom gabdan samlo tansak Tolayang on the Geshe or.
So for those of you who have joined us just recently, we're now looking at the type of reflections, a way of thinking that you develop when you think about your life or death in a Buddhist way.
There did so jigres Chomatabi Tachi Gom Gayagi Pigi Tachi Marsa Rodi and Dishagados Tanda Shibani Sawasum Gunsengo Tak Cheba Sum Yukon Gomber Chao said Rachomata Gom Lugitachi and net Tatu the Tiris.
And having said that, now we're going to get to the principal reflection of death and impermanence, which employs three root points. Each one of them consists of three arguments, which means each one of them consists of three arguments, which means 9 reasons altogether, right? So 3 root points, 9 reasons, and then we draw 3 conclusions. So this is explained in the next section in Amazon Kappa's text, how to cultivate mindfulness of death. So we meditate on death using the 3 reasons, or the 3 main points, sorry, 9 reasons, and draw 3 conclusions.
There's that the Jadamanchang Tangigo did that injiming on the Nego does similar Tirimpi Nyamba Samayba, similar Yen, Sawasum Slawandi, and Gacha Gatamba, Pigi Tangeba di Karis Landi. nganzu chiwa ngeba res nime losa du zawa sum gyunzen go tajewa sum yugo goma chao tela zawa sum slawar ngebar chiwa samba namchi ngeba meba samba chiwitsi che madoba kanki kya mapemba samba was.
So here Lama Tsongkhapa says, fourth, you should meditate on this by way of the three root thoughts, the 9 reasons, and the 3 decisions or conclusions. Now, when we read through that and we use that for our meditation on death and impermanence, it's not that we just think of those points. We need to, first of all, we need to retain the 3 roots in a mind stream, to remember them, to retain them, but also to think about them to the point in which we reach a definite conclusion. So with respect to the 3 roots, for example, it says in this regard, the 3 root thoughts are, first of all, it is certain that we will die. So death is certain, that's the first root. The second one says it is uncertain when we will die. The time of death is uncertain. And the third one is at the time of death, nothing except for the Dharma will be of benefit.
Tirda nganzu semnala ya sula geji tiba na nganzu nimachila shigore shigre vesla na ta peshi pi ta chi ngoni samlu yongi jimba na ya ja ta shigre slagur ma do chigo mar sengi ji yo mar was di ya tam bar was ro ti nganzu semla ya ngi go chi nimachila nganzu ta ane chi luden de torgo wa ane tsende ne pyogo wa kanji ane ukche goya di semnala ya mache goni ngeba ni goya chik ro sem ting ni ngeba ni goya chik nanga chik sungo da dia chewa ngeba imbi gyunse an zawi ne shonala ya sum sungor de ina diko chik pigila ya ane tha ngeba zamato kerang gi gyunse gyata mambu samta yungrela samta chogres ro.
Now, in general, when we have discussions about death, Geshe reckons that in general, if we will be asked if one day we will die, we will admit that one day it will happen to us. We will say that 100% guaranteed that one day we will die. If you can think about it, Geshe reckons that no one will admit or will claim that death will not come to them. Everyone will agree that one day they will die. One day we will give up our body and life. One day the breathing process will be severed. Death is certain to come to us. So here, in order to think of the certainty of death, Lama Tsongkhapa explains 3 reasons or arguments that we can use in order to reflect upon the certainty of death. But here Lama Tsongkhapa is just mentioning 3 main points for the reflection of the certainty of death. It's not that you will not be able to find other reasons for proving the certainty of death. Actually, you can come up with countless reasons proving the certainty of death.
Da tene namchi ngeba meba samba set namchi ta nganzu chigo gres ta kadu chigres laba na suchi ki laptuk maras tara suchi ki laptuk marda ji sanji jomden de ro inam na to ane su laptuk maras.
Now, the second point is saying that the time of death is uncertain. There is no certainty whatsoever with respect to the actual time of our death, and no one can actually predict it precisely for us, not even the Buddha.
There that there gunzen and mambuk tony ra ngeba meba di pe and re that namra mambuk ton sometime yoros that chivitse slawandi chivitse and tsin tse puni and kewa chimala ya drubitse tanga kewa chima shishachin kewa chima killing yoba shishachin kewa chima yoba shishachin gejet shiwaros ta kewa chimala ya drubitse Kari pengres, ngazu tsin dila ya lega chejaba nani, kari ki kewa chimala ya pengres labana. Da chwe mato, kerangi kari cheba yobana ya, chwe mato kangi kyan pengmares.
So the time of death is uncertain. And the third root is At the time of death, nothing will be of help apart from the Dharma. Nothing else apart from the Dharma will be of benefit.
Right. Is lega shamba tsamalo kerang gi tajik ane ta gyuchenbu soya di ta nganzu mi nang tajik ane kecheshu jitgo ta gyuchenbu soya di ige gewa chimala peng mares na gachi jatan peng mares pembi drubshi jigoro pembi drubshi tindu tsang yo mares kanzu gyuchenbu penjo saya di ji karso da dandur nyong sora jik lega matang jik mache bayna da gacha ta yani gacha gubchu kogu ani tabshi mundo astara tabshi mundo ta chidangi ta ko thandeng tone penjo saya jik ta yungur da ine thya jik sindi chedure mado kewa chimala phandi ani ngazu ribi druptu mundo astara ribi drumutung inji ani pengris lavdana madana gugba uzuk sora jira asra.
At the time of death, nothing will be of help apart from the Dharma. So looking at the things that we pursue in this life, like for example, most people in this life consider wealth to be of utmost importance. Accumulating possessions, being wealthy. So you cannot come up with a proof that proves that becoming wealthy in this life will help you in future lifetimes. There is no proof for that. Also, can you hear me? All right, so. All right, what about now? Okay, so we cannot come up with a proof that becoming wealthy in this life will be helpful for future lifetimes. And often on account of becoming wealthy, or for the sake of becoming wealthy, we act in ways in which we try to support and care for those who are close to our heart and subdue our enemies or defeat those that we don't like. And temporarily, we might prevail. It might be that we do manage to become wealthy, to amass possessions and so forth. And it might bring us some temporary benefit in this life. But in terms of using that in order to bring about positive states of rebirth or positive things in future lifetime, we have no guarantee. We have no proof that whatever we amass, whatever might be the wealth that we amass in this life, will be of benefit to us in future lifetimes. So here it says that at the time of death, nothing else will be of help apart from the Dharma.
Tereda tambula sum ani gunzen gunani ta chiwa ngeba telya ani gunzen sum sonde tambula sum chida ngebor honla tyan kengi dogdu meba samba set ken kangi kya ra ani chida shinji leba ina ken kangi kya dogdu meba chik ra go to jabo inandra ma changbo sigra di inandra kanji sunda jigi imba ina 아니 수강기 도토면 도스라 도 깬 간다지기야 아니 걔는 유여자로 매자로 아니 치월레비칼 그냥 지하면 도스라 어디래.
And yet we foolishly insist on mainly focusing on accumulating wealth and the like. So then when we look at the first root reason, which explains the certainty of death, it is explained using three arguments, sorry. So the actual reasons for that is the law of death will certainly come and there are no conditions for warding him off. It cannot be avoided. So you cannot find any condition, friends, relatives, or what have you, any condition that might be put to use to completely ward off the law of death. The law of death will certainly come and cannot be avoided.
The demon laws and the said, sailor number making Geshe Parmachidu Yoba Samba. Sembi Tsiang, Churchavi, Lomeba, Nibar, Chiwa Samba was.
Now, the second and third reasons are as follows. One, lifespan cannot be increased and diminishes incessantly. And the third point is you die without having had time to practice Dharma while alive.
다 데레 담보니 류 친다시 랑바탄 율 칸두 데바탄 뒤 남이야 체윈 점버 솜레 손라스 다 산지 손나라 라 손여스 대대로 태양 göbi çöbam toptan nordan zedan ngağdan mengi doğdu meba gabula damba gombulu duki rinjen tawa re gabul dambal sonsos.
So let's look at the first point, which says that a lot of death will certainly come and cannot be avoided. It says, in collection of indicative verses, it says that whatever body you have taken, whichever place you reside in, at any time, you will be defeated by death. It will come to pass in that way and cannot be averted by fleeing swiftly away or by force, wealth, material substances, mantras, or medicine. As it is says in the advice of the King Sutra, Kama was said, now some fear of death is necessary. At that moment of death, you must not be apprehensive. We do it the other way around. Now we are not afraid, but at the moment of death, we dig our fingernails into our chests.
테레다디 나조 비기 다치 잠블링기 비기 다치 네술 톤딩이 짐바이나 다 아니 갸보다 노르다 톱다 카리 여바이나야 왕 카리 여바이나야 아니 치 비기 수즈기 레조 아니 치와 토트 바비칼야 다 도토 메바디 nganzu ngosum dun thonya do chi ra chi yakab khashi ge ani pembo wan chimbo phigi ge ani dzu ge sozu phigi de khang la soba da dzu khazu sig phigi ge ani pu thagbo ani chi yari yakse ani chi rumbo chin da man de sweja bi ti yoba ina ya ani chi ani kosom mamre chanjare ta yong soba yoba ina ya 아니 타마델라야 직 사동직난 주치 아니 치고야 게 탑에 담니 시고야 나 소바 용구도 왔어 데리다 간지 레라 파비칼이야 강기게 도도 메바치 이마디다 세우슈레스라.
As Lama Tsongkhapa says here, regardless of how much power you have, you might be a king, you might be a ruler, you might be wealthy, you might have many possessions, you might have medicines and so forth. At the end, death will certainly come. Not only this is what Lama Tsongkhapa says here, when we look at affairs of the world, when we look around us, we can come up with examples of these things coming to pass. We might be able to recognize it, to see that there were those that had great powers, kings, rulers, and so forth, living in opulent palaces, having retinues, having a great team of staff members, helpers, and so forth, having precious jewels, precious ornaments, precious things. And at the end, even they were not able to ward off death. Even they, at the end, came to the point in which the body was put on a pyre, or that they weren't able to speak anymore, and then the life force has been severed.
데르다 나즈지 다 까우까라야 단칭 잠블링 네스르디게 아니 치 소소 아니 총롱라야 티야게 켄딘데 용거스 까우까라야 안 잠블링 네츠고 토네 만줄라 로비게 망부슈직 라 라야 딘디 용고도 왔으라.
Sorry, the camera just went dead first. Yeah, maybe it's working now. Let's try it out. La, Karisin?
Zambling nitsu nganzu tongdi kaukala nganzu chi pi cholong la tik de ado chi kaukala nganzu digi lobje raya chi pro samdansa chi.
When we look at affairs in the world around us, sometimes the mind becomes biased in passing or trying to make sense of the things around us, but also sometimes the mind becomes in tune with reality, particularly here when we think of death and impermanence and we look at what's happening to us what's happened to people around the world, we can become more in sync with reality.
Ani kama bishani tada chewi jigwa shi go ngarsola ya kar gores lamde tada semnala ya jig ani chewala ya jig samlo tanji kondu shewana chewala jigwa shi gores ani chinkar ani mtsawa shi go des ina ya ngandu deli dogte tada minjikshi chekar ani thangla semon debaso pegi ta ngamra mawshu chede yungu doase songde ati.
Amazon Kappa refers here to one of the saying of the Kamawa. It says, now, some fear of death is necessary. At the moment of death, you must not be apprehensive. But we do it the other way around. Now we are not afraid where we should be afraid. And at this moment of death, we dig our fingernails into our chests.
Tere nganzu ta gegen dindi songresro nganzu pigi chiwa dyugyo mardaina ya kiela ya chagya mebadi changa mebadi pe nongju reshas nganzu kiwa khanda jileng sambigi jigda di ro tanganzu shidogre sambigi che mende lodi ani pigi yungyo ordaina ya ta kiwa khanda jileng samsamgi samla ya thokpa tsawni mebanza nongju dini shodru dos ro kewa dindijila lamba na pesa sare samsung kewa sambujila lena chimarong sambi lo yabu jeba na ani kewa sambu lenya gi thola ya bejun chiach te di yong ba na ngang gi chhechi goya chi chadu dos o dindi mamusung dos
Kya kanuchi 연결했어야 디 kewa yakbo 요나스인데 상기 말.
chesa di samgo dos
네, chesa notu karina.
di samgo mar tanganzu kewa lamba kewa dindijila na samsung samlo di khortu mo dos ti nong chu reshas.
The teachers say that we often don't think of the type of rebirth that we will take next, wondering what type of rebirth will it be? Not thinking about it is a mistake. Not fearing death and what awaits for us after death, the next rebirth that we will take, is a mistake. Not considering avoiding a miserable state of rebirth and trying as much as possible to go to a pleasant or a better state of rebirth is what we normally do, and this is a mistake.
Anibani nganjule sombatar and tsetse lodya tubani sentara thanglas te tub to chugya ti parji loni dawa shakdan shak ninsen sonwe pigi zogdogres zelas teyang hatu so sonwe zebe nam si chitse teyang har tomashik se nan shi Lagla ya neba meba ane dren cheba parmachidu yebi chedi chonjuli ninsen deba yo meba tsend dagdu kogyurshi neba koni ongomena dagdan chewa chimingyuru she so teyan tagawe ane tagbatan seja sosar kombariri nye somatan chukzi chuk rama meba ranusu kewa so pe tumi gwani samshi gyache roba lekyan Sixameta Tonkin Tintandra, Tengi Tintandra, Drovi Kachi, Kinchi Kala Tatan Song, Drovi Central Namki Londa, the Reserve Babchu Tower, New Young Dro She, Pay Tomisonsos.
So with respect to the next reasons that is used in order to think of the certainty of death, one lifespan cannot be increased and diminishes incessantly. Right? A lifespan cannot be extended and it diminishes. It constantly diminishes. It says, as it says in the Descent into the Womb Sutra, attaining a lifespan of 100 years seems to be the limit of what is possible. However, even if you reach that, meanwhile, the years until then waste away with the passage of months after month, day after day, and day and night. As day too waste away with the passage of morning and so on, it seems that much of your lifespan has already finished, and the remainder also diminishes incessantly without anything being added. In Shantideva's engaging in bodhisattva behavior, it says, this life decreases constantly day and night without respite. If from nowhere there is increase, either how can I not die? Further, Lama Tsongkhapa says, you should consider this by way of numerous analogies, such as a weaver weaving cloth, animals to be slaughtered approaching the place of slaughter with each step, cattle being led without any control to the place by a herder, and so forth. This is also taught in the Sutra of Extensive Play by means of many analogies. And the Sutra says, for example, impermanent, autumn cloud-like. The three existences, the birth and death of beings, resemble a show. The passage of life of a being like a fish like a flash in the sky, it passes as fast like a waterfall from a steep mountain.
Tenas nandu sambigi tik tsukba shigla chi ngubo tamje mataba medemba mes ra nganzu samlo tangtu bayna ani suzu samlo namjugi chogbayna ani chi ngubu toni ani chik medaba medemba jik chongse gen yomaris tamchegi suzu tatu bayna tamchegi medaba netsulti tendemba rojres desungdas ra meto medaba medemba me somba yimbe go thomani le mandu samna ani chiwa medabi ngiba kigres chungse rela machong chibi mebende kama bishani sambe machong serde kegi namsam nimoni yanyanchi semoni ni login duna ani kera deri machong serde kyagzun rendos zumases somba daros.
And Lama Tsongkhapa continues in saying, for someone with certainty from inner contemplation, there are no external phenomena that do not point out impermanence to them. So then, when we think of the world around us, can we find anything that is not impermanent? Look at things around you. Can you find an example of one thing that is not impermanent? Since we cannot find any example of things around us that are not impermanent, then we can also think of our own life and come to the conclusion of our own death and impermanence. And then it says, since this is taught, certainty arises if you consider it often from many angles. There is no benefit in thinking one has considered something several times, but still no certainty has arisen. As Kamawa said, you say nothing has come about through contemplation, but when did you contemplate? During the day, you indulge in distractions. At night, you sleep. Don't lie. So Geshe says that what Kamapa here indicates is that you might pretend that there is no result to your contemplation, that at the end, you cannot reach a conclusion. But Kamapa said, are you really thinking about it? Looking at your lifestyle, you indulge during the day and you sleep during the night. So don't lie about contemplating this topic.
Tse tar cheda ki chomde jigden parudun ro mase di barkabso tse tini mundruga kap yeni mebes nima chig yina ya ani pigi segin chig nanglo yina ya nganzu chig ani tse dele ya deni kewa chimala ya mundruga kap chig zao yina mundos tila gorisro kap ye mebe ngar tu shubani sonde Kechik Zamya Medeba Chemandrova Katemba Yinos
And it says, it is not just that death destroys us at the end of our life and we have to go to the next world. Up until then, also, there is not even a moment, not even a second when we are not proceeding towards it as our life diminishes, right? So we are getting closer and closer to death. Our lifetime is diminishing.
The Geshe jigba roj de dindi yungu dos ngi lo shivchu shedang ji kongi Geshe jari parstonsara jigba roj tanda.
But some of us seems as if this process of disintegration is not happening to them. Like, for example, Geshe saw a photo of Geshe Gary, probably from his 40s, and he looks exactly the same. I don't know, actually, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. You might look really, yeah, you might look 70 when you were 40. Yeah.
Lama Yishinyan.
Sorry? Yeah, otherwise you always look stupid. Tanda tena niema tena kadu tena then the kupada wotongi dosa.
Kukbar de miti da pata di kuksaza pe mazo ngote uyor lagorla dengan febaina.
Actually, the way that the Bens speak about it is like whether in whatever way you look at that person, they always look smart, like being able to outdo everyone. This is how you look, Gary.
Lama Yishinyamdo Parsidosra Chikton Gubje Chuka Chigresha and the Tenit not Chiktesa. Something like a Tinanto. Kuchikwa Dong San Matar, and that Jigwa
Geshe had a browse through the 2 books that were recently published telling the life story of Lama Yeshe. Is it called Big Love? So someone gave Geshe a copy of the life story of Lama Tsongkhapa and a few photos, sorry, Lama Yeshe. And there are a few photos of students from the past. And one of them is a photo of Geshe Gary together with Lama Yeshe. And Geshe says that you look exactly the same. Maybe it was Chrissy, actually. Maybe you look like Chrissy.
Tena sirwa, tena ta parji sumba na yang giwi poni tigni chiwi cherdon rowa kona sebi sumbi kawlan jigden chima mundruwi debara soni gawar michades. Ta dindi samba na di chuna re mado suzu mashiwa re mado kejik zameda dego maris debo michade pena chak tumbu zeni Longi tse sala malongi par sala malongi parnala drove kavla gawar moba somba shenos.
And it continues as saying, therefore, even ever since we entered the womb, we have been going straight towards a future life without remaining still even for a mere instant. This being so, our intervening life also wastes away as we go towards death, led by its harbingers, disease and aging. Therefore, do not rejoice in the view that you're abiding during your life without approaching future worlds. So if you pretend as if you're really happy-go-lucky in this life, in pretending that you're not going to proceed from this lifetime to the next upon your death, this is certainly not the truth. This is a false appearance that you give. It is like the analogy that when falling off the top of the high cliff, the time of falling through the sky before crashing to the ground is not worthy of joy.
Den shivja bin dewa tambali mei pawo tomin semon ne kalan jigden ngana ne kirpa teni tsamdi teni nyireshin dreshur meban chida chondun dro she sonsos.
So the section concludes with a quotation from the commentary on the 400 stanzas. It says, "Hear of men, in that night at the very beginning, when someone comes to dwell in a womb in the world, starting from that point, he moves with each day without the pause of a step towards the Lord of death.
somebody 대점 톱도 추경스 롱유 참롱데 롱유 날 규즈유 삼 무롱데 nganjule sombatar tambu chebi tu lochun chudribi samba minyeji tar gibi kab lo nyishun chudribi tu mela di parji tusuya niki che keshi ne sokya tu tuma shikseni chujibi kab chonse le medo 대달나 센디 분조 탐제는 물론 튠찍나 대화 trepa senni tembatar chiwi tusu tembi yutsamdun gyurla chiwi drani ngebar ona sendi lutrikla jishir gawa cha nyamdu samdi chiwi ngebar chagobala tak chichi shen tam mandu chadi kerabli kemawun jigden nyumun tak nepa menta gamen gyur kumundaye pandaya temba chawa nidun gyur shesonsus.
And then the third point in our reflection of the certainty of death says you die without having had time to practice Dhamma while still being alive. Even if you may indeed live for so long, it is inappropriate to think you have time. As it is stated in Descending to the Womb Sutra, initially during the first 10 years of childhood, it does not occur to you to practice the Dhamma. And at the end, during the 20 years of old age, you do not have the power to practice the Dhamma. Of the time in between, sleep snatches away one half. Illness and the like also waste much time, and no more than a few occasions remain to practice the Dhamma. So then when we draw conclusion from these 3 points that the Lord of Death will certainly come and cannot be avoided, that our lifespan constantly diminishes and cannot be extended, and even while being alive, there's so little time to practice the Dhamma, the conclusion says, since it is like this, at the time of death, all the excellence of this life will only be an object of recollection, like the recollection of the happy experience in a dream after you wake up. Why would you delight in being beguiled by this life if the enemy, who is death, will certainly come? With this thought in mind, you should take the decision that you certainly need to practice the Dhamma and reiterate this innermost feeling many times. From the Garland of Death stories, it says, alas, afflicted worldly beings, your stay is not stable, there is no joy. Even this water lily's splendor will soon be but a memory.
이번에 대리 pen 아니 로갸춘라 치와 ngeban 원시 디 파르도 샤 칸라와 오 망해베 대링 따위 메치 치면치 강도야 탁 메치 수견 탁 메치스라는 저기도 왠냐 르 메치비 초존이 대링 치냠비 로게 거디 대링 메치냠도 르 메치비 초존나 센디 도르 제체니 치미 탑 제바 몽웨 디바르도 치다게 손디 냥엔의 지신도 치고서 니마레레시 치르치나 치미 대망분 드베 마시야 대체바 레글라 신나네 캬버드야 대고소스.
That brings us to the second root point in the reflection on death and impermanence, which says it is uncertain when we will die. And there are 3 points to that section. The first one is the need to generate mindfulness of death every day. And it says, it is certain that death will come between now and 100 years from now, and it is not certain. Geshe said that it is to say that no one can certainly tell you on which day in between it will. Therefore, it is not definite on any day like today whether you will die or not. Nonetheless, the mind should be biased towards the idea of death, and you should generate the awareness that thinks, I will die today. For if the mind is biased toward the idea of not dying with the thought, I will not die today, you constantly prepare for staying in this life and you will not prepare for future lives. Due to this, if you get seized by the Lord of Death in the meantime, you will have to die in anguish. However, if you prepare to die every day, you will accomplish a lot that is meaningful for the future, so that even if you do not die, it is good to have done it. And if you do die, it was all the more necessary.
Delesums, Zambelim Bitsela Neba maybe, Namching Neba Meba Samba. Chigin Shindu Manshi, Swingin Yoma Samba, Lushin du Nyam Chongwe, Namching Neba Meba Samba was. Tambo Cher Damini Bitseni, Negi, Shenamgi, Ranrangi Tsetse Tubi Neba Menama, Peche Neba Mala, Zambelimba Shindu Mangeba Yendi. Tambur Lo Pame Tuba Chongla. Tandu Luchula Rinta Chegoshin, Tadanya Genjon Parma Kanaya, Kanla, Chingiba Menango, Tedarian Zole, Dina Mangin Taman Lochu Tambu Padume Sheso, Lama, Trolla Soba, Set Tarmachimba, lower the Chenangi, Chigingi Shivanam Yigla Chela, Dadian Tedavi Chijeno Nyamdu Yansamos.
There are three actual reasons for the contemplation of the uncertainty of the time of death. Of those, so there's three main points saying that there is no certainty with regards to a lifespan in Jambudvipa, which is why the time of death is uncertain. That's the first point. The second says there are many conditions that lead to death and few conditions that promote life. And the third is the body is extremely vulnerable and the time of death therefore is uncertain. Let's begin with the first point. There is no certainty with regards to a lifespan in Jambudvipa, which is why the time of death is uncertain. It says first, in general, the lifespan of beings in Uttarakuru is certain. For most beings of the other continents, there is more certainty, even though it may not be certain that the full extent of the lifespan of each individual is reached. However, for the beings of Jambudvipa, the lifespan is extremely uncertain. In the beginning, they even reached immeasurable years. Later on, 10 years of age will be the maximum duration. And even nowadays, it does not seem certain whether they die in their old age, in the youth, or in between. The treasure of knowledge says, here it's uncertain. In the end, 10 years initially. Beyond, here it's uncertain. In the end, 10 years. Initially, beyond measure. You should take to heart the fact that your gurus of friends and so forth have died through sudden internal external conditions for death before reaching the end of their lives. And you should think over and over again, I too have similar qualities.
There's a never messadi, Gacha Gatamba, Redostra, Nanzoleta, Monsum Tonde attendee. Penangege, Penzendo, Chunju Shivana, Nango Shiva Chik, Ya Consola Pomunido, and Pomuchik di Chair de Loshichi, Chonga de Dawashi, and Pomudi, the doing like a kid in a church in the throat, doing a shy, etc. And Consul Tapeshi Power Digi, Pomochonga Loshi Chamba di Tigasari, and Consul Sanjan Plaza Ladrodo. Sanjan Plaza Ladroni, Consul that you dang a drone to the home to power the Rido. Riche, Annie, the milk doing a pool Dawashi Chamba Kedera, Lamsam Pigi, the Rochetu Marada. But those chinda and the pass of Kavaja and Chogat Chin Mangan to the Chuzu Cheganala Tonda. That did it of the depends on Chiredos and Anzolera.
It is certain that the time of death is uncertain. We cannot be certain when death will come to us. And it is guaranteed, 100% guaranteed that we can look around us at the reality that we experience and come to terms with the uncertainty of the time of death. Like, for example, Geshe has a friend having two daughters. One of them was 4 years old at the time. The other one was 4 months old. She was walking into the Sunshine Plaza one day with the whole family, the husband, so forth. And all of a sudden her husband collapsed. She was carrying the 4 months old daughter in front, so she couldn't really do much. An ambulance was called, the husband was taken to the hospital, and he died within half an hour. All right, so there is no certainty with respect to the time of death, and such things that we can see around us demonstrate that in 100% guarantee.
This dinangwala depends on the carson nanganzo and chigi mangshin swingin yong some said big namjunganzo meba chigor said did some remondos and nanzu chiwi kin di namjunganzo swingin laya chik susu and lutsaya neya debu yong yagi chedu and chik drip de lonja mang chejigi nganzo chigin la tanya pemonboras ra. 아니 지금 아니 가서 다시 수수 초보다 초무ță 돼서 딘딘망부 돈이 아니 지긴란 줘야기 gem빼망부 연구여라서 간지 간주 비 아니 수행경 기체도 저제 메레스 라바이나야 아니 디기 지긴란 줘딩이 빼 장대바 여러서 아니 어디를 딘자 간지 지긴 만신 수행경 용어세디 가시가단 버리스.
In the reflection of the uncertainty of the time of death, the second main point says that there are so few conditions that support life, and so many conditions support death, can bring about a death. And that also is something that we can see in our life. To begin with, there are so many things, so many conditions that we try to gather in order to remain long in this life, to remain long and healthy and stable. And although we try to use those conditions in order to remain in that way in our life, there are occasions in which even those conditions that are supposed to support life, they bring out death. In terms of the food that we eat, the products that we use and so forth, we make preparation for remaining long in this life, but there are many occasions in which those conditions act as condition for death. And the same thing can also say with respect to those who are close to our heart, our friends and relatives and so forth. We have friends and relatives, and we sometimes think that we rely upon them in remaining alive, but even they can be in some situations as conditions. They can become conditions that support death. In fact, when we look at the world around us, we can see that there are countless conditions which can cause our death. So altogether, in this point in our reflection, Lamrim Kappa points out that there are so many conditions which are conducive to death, and so few conditions are there supporting life.
Peshe mar drugers lavna love chogros ra susu chogona le pugu kenlam tangi ta nyima la pe gata mambu yungu yoros ra diphi kenlam da tanya gi chagi bi men search tian kon zambling le ya trimdin zigoros ra o dindri chan sangla ta wana nganzu senggen chigyen manshin senggen nyon se de gachi yadan varis.
We can also think of living in a world in which there are those conditions that ideally would be there to support your life, but in certain situations, they can actually cause your death. Like, for example, even in terms of parenthood. So generally, we can say that parents, of course, are those who nourish their child, they support their child, they nurture the child. But it seems that with modern day technology, there are more and more cases in which parents are not necessarily those that support life. Those that can terminate life. Like, for example, when we think of having a greater access to birth control, to abortion and so forth. So it seems that with modern day technology, you could say that in some sense, there are more conditions that can terminate life rather than more conditions that support life.
Tirida do sometime by na and sometime on the no drug yoba Romang Chajiki Pigi Chick, Saint Digi, Tianjik, Range Shambam, Ariro, Kanji, and then Dongam Jig Tony. Then that bed then drum and the Chedigi of some along on the Chigin Chagos, the Kanji, Chigin is raw.
And also we have a greater ability now to secure our own victory, even at the expense of others, even at the defeat of others. We can do it much better today than before, which again follows the same argument of so many conditions which are supportive of death and so few conditions which are supportive of life.
Odere ta kanji nganzu nebirile ya tiri nganzu tanda nganzu neyo wanza neyo bi garden di tembi toni ani chik tadarang pigi chik trandeng ani tsewa mebi ge samloch tang to bayna ani geje ji to bayna ani namgyu ji ten to bayna ta tires ro kewa jimala phen di tires ro sani phen di tires kanji mezedela ta yakshu di tire dos ro tindri ro ji samltani.
Which means that for the time being, as we're alive, it's good to make sure that in our behavior, we behave in a way that is honest and sincere as much as we can. It will be helpful in terms of future lifetimes, and also it will be helpful for the coming day in this life, for tomorrow onwards. So think about it. And with that, we will leave it here for today.
Much jealous.
So are you referring to first in general, the lesser of beings of Uttarakuru is certain? And for most beings of the other continents, there is more certainty, even though it may not be certain that the full extent of the lifespan of each individual is reached. However, the beings for the Jambudvipa, beings of Jambudvipa, the lifespan is extremely uncertain. Are you referring to this section? All right, so Rosa is asking if Geshe could give an explanation of those different, maybe different states of existence and what they mean. Dila, Ling Shemba Tensolat, Pena Jaminyem Betseni, Ngengi, Shenangi, Ranjangi, Tsetse, Tube Ngeba Mebe Nang, Pecho Ngeba Mangla Sashlo. Just on the Ling Shi, that Pena the Zamulin La Ngeba Meba Ling Shila Ngeba Yoba said the. That's just get away.
That dozo Changbutanjan Shabana Pig Nibania Doge that you touch over Dojinga Shemes. And the Ningu Sonzo dozo Nachi Kavkalea and it Dachimba Kilemutung and India Yungioras. Kanji didn't song yours that Kanjira and the Damin Benata and the Damin building said Lea and the Leo Marin Tonyo Mare. And the Hong Kyo Tambatsogi and a Kansong Batelia, Shichia Dojimado, and it's Rikpe Tony, and it Chandamin Bigi, and it says the Neva Imbadi, Manzu that Shikpa Penata Chigi Manch, Swinging, that Gunsen, the disorder, sometimes Pekabudos, Nan Kabupedos, Tingashe Mesro.
To be completely honest about this first argument that Lama presents here in speaking about other continents, it is not something that Geshe himself can resolve with full confidence that this is exactly as it is stated here by Lama Tsongkhapa in drawing from the writings of other masters. In general, when you look at the writings of great masters of the past, some of them can be taken literally and some of them are not literal teachings. So with respect to this set of teachings, which says that in a certain cosmology of the world, it is said that there are 4 continents, and the continent that we live in is called Jambudvipa, or Earth. Whereas in other places, where on Earth the lifespan is uncertain, whereas there are other places or other continents, so to speak, where the lifespan is uncertain. Well, Geshe says that it's hard to really develop certainty with respect to that. It's hard to know whether you can actually take it literally or not. So the great masters of the past that have explained it like that. So we just here follow a set of teachings we draw from such sources. And Geshe says that for the time being, we just read through those passages, but it's quite hard to think that this is definitely the case. Whether or not it is the case that here that in other continents or in other places or in other realms of existence, the lifespan is certain. Geshe doesn't know if that can be taken literally or not, whether Geshe can conclude that with great confidence. But here we can say that at least with respect to this realm that we live in, the lifespan is indeed uncertain.
Thank you.
Mr. Rob? All right. So did you say that the text said at the beginning that one shouldn't contemplate death all the time? They should be done periodically? So no, at some point the text says that one shouldn't be meditating death constantly. So I think that the question is for us, yeah, what's the practical? How often, to what degree should we reflect upon our oncoming death? 바가지라 제림보체기 패션 나서 야만 일단 뭐 카드이네 체험이 따바 gongo gres special sungi mares kakablandende sungires yansi gongo gres sunshasa 제전 그런 samnangaso 체험이 따바 sam바이나 체험이 따바 상와이나 ngaso 가주 상고 그res nima takbar nima rela temakashi kaukalamato kasu gongo gres
자랑기 단징한 좀 곧마 주온디라 자와숨다 균진 구구 간틀이야 식다더라 델 디오레스 곰자이야 다도 문제 냠바든 간줄 이어리지 얘네야 직세지도 니 디데레샤 숨바니라 소바다 타지톤데 타바네 은 람라마 슈비 치발라 타루 임비 텐데 키바 메노 세즈문데 니땡
Niena sabatan jawe doto tani di maro.
어디 도네 타바네 세즈도 디 강들이야 디 강들로다
No.
곰자 이야 당부 총세 곰기 균도 냠nen데 몬스 냠도 무송와 통타 발숨도 글라 네바 닌 타반 게디 곰버 차오세 제르무지 디손다스 어떻게 가드이나 곰고마르세 쓰드 칼텐스라 가드이나 곰고야도 통다 발숨슬라디 가드이나 곰고야 디송도스.
So looking at this section, Geshe reckons this is a section that you probably refer to. Therefore, you should not think this is a practice for those who do not have the profound Dhamma to meditate on. And although it is something to meditate on, it should be meditated on a bit in the beginning, but it is not suitable to be practiced continuously. So you shouldn't think about it like that. Rather, you should think about it in the following way. You should meditate on it until you gain certainty from the bottom of your heart that it is necessary in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end.
다 통다 발숨 슬라온디기 아니 가드이나라고 하다 다양 가드이나 슬라온디기 비기 나 똥바니 곰비캅 코란라야 아니 지금 마다와 곰고 딘딜라고 말다스 똥바니 곰바이나 이나야 가리치도 곰고 팅안도 차지고라스 텔레야 이지미니기 아니 혼도델야 처마다와 삼비 로이 인지미 생고야지 잔주심 곰바이나야 가리치도 곰고 디기 아니 귤라야 처마다와 팀빌로 간지 치워마다 와디 가드 있나야 비기직 가드 있나야 치워마다 왔으면 고야지 송고도스 제로마치.
So here when Lama Tsongkhapa says you should meditate on death and impermanence, so contemplate that at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, it says you should gain certainty. Rather, you should meditate on it until you gain certainty from the bottom of your heart that it is necessary in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. We do other meditations as well. Like, for example, we meditate on emptiness. So when we meditate on emptiness, Lama Tsongkhapa is not saying that at that very time we should also meditate on death and impermanence. It's rather that for the meditation on emptiness, the reflection on death and impermanence is a necessary preliminary. And the same thing can be said also with respect to meditating on, for example, bodhicitta. So to meditate on bodhicitta, you need also to, as a preliminary stage, to reflect upon death and impermanence. So in such a way, when Lama Tsongkhapa says that it is necessary at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, he refers to most of the practices that we do, if not all of them, that necessitate, first of all, initially to think of death and impermanence.
이제 간지 아니 메타버스는 빌로디 낭기 용야치 고레스 낭기 용야치 고스란디 뒤균제 매바치 비길야치 자주 통바이나야 아니 뒤냠도 텐투야도치 지금 로비어바이나야 람산 지금 텐투야치 간지 낭기 용야치 고르송야데 백케쳔부 송도 스라.
And here when Lama Tsongkhapa says, rather you should meditate on it until you gain certainty for the bottom of your heart, in a sense that it will become a thought that will automatically arise in your mind, even as far as when you perform simple things, like, for example, when you have a cup of tea, or when you go out for a walk. This thought of the certainty of death, or death in general, should arise in your mind automatically, until you reach the point in which it comes up from the bottom of your heart in such a way. You should continue with reflecting upon death and impermanence. All right, so the analogy of the best time for plowing a field is the autumn. Kind of, it doesn't work for you. You don't understand how it works here. Yeah, you don't think that you got the meaning, because it might imply that the best time to practice the Dhamma is at the end of your life. Yeah, the autumn of your life, rather than the winter. Yeah. Dila Shinka Moba du Yakshu di Dumba Resna Chiksundo. Pechik Shawaina Shinka Mubegi Dutu Yakshu du Chok Sajdoa. Dumba Resna, Tunka Resna Chiksundo. De Kandachina, de Sheda Tim Sheda Koindusa, Kansana Dunda de Jawaina Kandachi Jagores and a Pesher Injiketola. Tonga di sei tamala shagres. Chesan
sei tama.
Sei tama gengo chadu. Chesan gengo chanama to nyamen chegi dutsu yashuragi ma resene lagirve kandichina.
간지 뒤돌아야 내가 최고야디 기체슈르세 내가 딘디도 코도스 아니 간주 뒤군 겨도 토니 비기 로도야 기에 뒤지다 아니 로도 따비에 뒤지 뒤따바에는 뒤진디지에 기에 뒤져져라스 뒤즈 될 따바이나 아니 차긴신 비기 아니 간주 남지 제르라 소바단 맨라 소바 딘디 모고바 아니 란신 그 로도 야부디 기 투게 자고레스 된다 조
The main meaning of the analogy, or the main way that this analogy is using, is describing the optimal time for meditating on death and impermanence. So the analogy says that, like, for example, when when you consider what would be the best season for plowing your field, it would be the season in which you will not have to resort to using other pesticides or a lot of fertilizers and so forth. It is just a season in which naturally things will grow in your field. As a result of that, naturally things will grow in your field. So when you find the right time, that is the best time. Here it says that's autumn, but in general, whatever time works for you in terms of growing whatever you want to grow, the best time would be to allow the time which will allow things to grow naturally without you having to resort to extreme means of pesticides, lots of fertilizers, and so forth.
There's a medabin dushidi yobana. Yangi tuzu tolatang mares. Going aging chudi and tuto coranlia drop to get chick. Chagri said, didn't you cogo was a restaurant.
Now, looking at the meaning of the analogy, Geshe reckons that the meaning of the analogy need to be such that you think that the reflection upon death and impermanence will be done to the extent that you will not have to force yourself to practice the Dharma. You have reflected upon death and impermanence to the point in which to practice the Dharma would not be something that you need to force yourself to put an effort into your practice of the Dharma. Naturally, the reflection on death and impermanence will make your Dharma practice flourish easily.
And do see on the Tsultrim Namyang Chol Danshach. Kanji do San Seven Chadang Chol Danshach. Ta gay Kovni Pila Kayam and Tangwani Chirendigi, any Lega non to Sama and similar tea, and in Gobaki, that didn't Gobaki in a Chetraguros. That chick which do some naya, Lug Jogomare, Nag Jogomare, any same jogomare that didn't chitagres. There's a tambon in medab dushigavana, Karangi, and it should drop to grace, and it should drop to an penguasajile pengros raw in Didochi.
But also on a practical level, looking at the way that we live our life, when we are young, we're so susceptible to mistaken appearances. Our mind or life is so susceptible to distractions and diversions. Basically, what it means is that when we're young, we are more susceptible to anger, attachment, and so forth. So it is harder than to, first of all, become mindful of death and impermanence, but also to then, while still being under the power of great anger and attachment, to have a meaningful or in-depth Dhamma practice. When we get old at some point, old and frail, and we start reflecting upon all the mistakes that we have done in our life, regret might be overwhelming, to the point of view in which whatever we do physically, verbally, or mentally will still be a bit dim, in a sense they will still be weak, will be overwhelmed by regret. So to prevent those states, it's best to maintain the reflection on death and impermanence. For if you reflect upon death and impermanence, that will naturally make you more inclined to practice the Dharma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lamrim.
All right, so we'll do the final Lamrim prayer. I forgot about it, so I'll just open the text on the screen. All right, there it is. For my two collections, vast is space that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief living Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings. To the points of the path as I have discerned them, may I hold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going up with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and may the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded path of enlightenment completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. It's a good way to conduct this Lamrim teaching. First of all, at the beginning of the Lamrim teachings, we recite together Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, then we do some Lamrim teachings and discussion, and we conclude out with the final dedication of the Lamrim. It's a good way of conducting those sessions. Thank you. Bingo. All right, so I'll also tell you to the people at home. So next week, we're going to start with the East Coast that will be focusing on Lama Tsongkhapa's Guru Yoga. So the East Coast would be, it will start on Thursday evening. It will be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday till lunchtime, I believe. So we will not have the usual morning session, the Lamrim session on Friday morning. Instead, we're going to be busy doing Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So first of all, even if you don't have the time to participate in all the sessions in all the retreat, you're still welcome to come and do sessions without complete sessions rather than being a spectator. Then if you want to come for a session, please do. Also the people at home, it will be on Zoom. So if you cannot come and join us here, you're welcome to join us on Zoom. But please register. So we have usually teachings on Friday morning. So for those of you who regularly come to the Friday morning sessions, please come here. You're welcome to come here also for the regular Friday session. 10:30 in the morning, we're going to do, rather than teachings, we're going to do the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. But this is something that we will do anyway during the Easter time, over Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So the first session every day will start at 8:30 in the morning. And Geshe was planning also to include some instructions on the way to correct the motivation and also how to visualize and meditate on Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So rather than giving the majority of the explanation at 8:30 in the morning, it will save it for the time in which we'll hopefully have more people. So anyway, that would be Friday at 10:30 in the morning. But after that, we have also Saturday and Sunday. And since many of you are enjoying the weekend and you don't have any particular task that you necessarily need to attend to, then you're also welcome to join us as much as you can. Time allowing, you're also welcome to join us during the weekend. Plus, but as you said, please register. Yeah. And? All right, so lunch will be offered, but you need to book. All right, so please make your lunch booking. Yeah, so Geshe Gary said that he's doing at least 14 sessions. At least. Picture.